Welcome to PhD with Woman on It Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hacks delivered will be by our guest, Dr. Grace Lordan. Topic: leveraging behavioral science, career, time, and resilience hacks. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, a forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring her to that tussle because empathy is my motto, and empathy is critical when you're leveraging behavioral science. First, let me mention things that's been happening in the world of technology, uh, of female advancement. We remember the indefatigable Iris Apfel, a fashion icon who passed away on March the 1st, 2024, at 102 years old. Her bold style and exuberant spirit continue to inspire, reminding us to embrace individuality and, quote, more is more and less is more. As she says, people are so tied up in the worst parts of technology these days, they don't use their imaginations. I encourage you all to use your imagination and celebrate Iris. Congratulations to our former PhD guest, Charlotte Fuller, for being recognized as the top spot on 50 Women in Startups and Tech. We are proud of you, Charlotte. Dennis Carlo, way to go. The FEMI CEO and former PhD guest raised the bar in coaching. She's calling all women in tech or business. If you're seeking an executive coach with 30 years of career experience, look no further. Denise workshops and coaching sessions for a blend of excellence and inspiration are posted in the comments below. Congratulations to Juliet Albert, front-end developer, on completing her expense tracker project hosted with Vercel. This app is valuable tool for individuals struggling to manage their expenses. Well done, Julia. Now let's go back to our topic. Leveraging behavioral science, career, time, and resilience hacks. Unlock your potential with behavioral science. In this interview, we'll explore how to apply it to transform your career, conquer biases, and change your life for the better. Discover strategies to take the charge of your career with our guest, Dr. Grace Lordan, who is the founding director of the Inclusion Initiative and an associate professor at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Grace is an economist with a labor market skills expert, bringing her expertise to our discussion and delivering your roadmap to a brighter, more resilient future. Grace, where in the world are you joining us from today?
So today I'm in London, and I should say, which isn't part of my bio, my first degree is in computer science. So I feel like I'm at home.
Oh, fantastic. We love the fact that you have pursued your career, even though it's not necessarily in computer science. So why did you choose a different career path?
So when I left my university degree, there was the dot-com bubble burst. So the economy wasn't so great, but for economists, there were many jobs and not so many for computer scientists. So it's pure bad luck that I haven't had a illustrious career in technology. But if anyone's listening and they're hiring, I'm always willing to take opportunities and maybe come back.
There you go. Absolutely. She's up for grabs. Now, speaking about behavioral science, here is another Iris Apfel great quote. I never had to look for confidence because I just wore what I wanted to wear. So, Grace, can you provide an example from your life or someone else's life where applying behavioral science principles led to a positive outcome?
Yes. So if you came to the London School of Economics, and I hope you will, one of the first classes in behavioral science that we'll give you would introduce you to the fast brain. So the idea that we have two different thinking modes, one slow brain, one fast brain. The fast brain is unconscious, it's habit driven, and we spend about 80% of our time in the fast brain. In contrast, the slow brain is much more slow and much more deliberate. So behavioral scientists have examined the idea between the fast brain and the slow brain to uncover a number of biases. And one that's really interesting to me is confirmation bias. So the idea that us as individuals, teams and organizations are at a deficit because they too often engage in confirmation bias, which implies that we seek out things that confirm our existing beliefs. For me, one of the best things that I've done for my career is circumvent confirmation bias. And I've done that by surrounding myself with a challenge network who is very diverse. They definitely are my critical friends. And they are the people who I go to them when I have an idea about where I might want to go, or I have an idea about a bad thing that's happening to me. And they definitely don't confirm my bias. And I've gained a lot in confidence from having these discussions, but also a lot in opportunities. So I'd encourage anyone who's listening to circumvent their own confirmation bias by getting a challenge network.
Challenging network, but also, Grace, I'm wondering, because during pandemic you didn't have that much opportunity to communicate with others unless it was a screen. How did you tackle that obstacle of still being, in your confirmation bias and the world gonna end and things are not looking so pretty?
So during the COVID-19 pandemic, my challenge network actually grew more diverse and more global because people all across the world became open to having one-to-one conversations. So I think when I entered the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody but one person in my challenge network resided in the UK from different countries originally, but they resided in the UK, and we would make times to meet up. During the COVID-19 pandemic, that expanded. So I now have people across all the continents in the world. So for me, it has been a gift, the pandemic, or there's been a silver lining that I've been able to make these connections that are global rather than just local.
Well, that goes into a very funny quote or a joke. If a husband is in a forest, can he still be wrong? That's another confirmation bias.
Yes,
So, can he still be wrong?
definitely.
There you go. There we go. Starting with some jokes with Dr. Grace today. We can definitely debunk some biases about a boring academic here. Now, if you're all alone, I mean, sometimes I'm wondering, because we live in Grand Turk. I'm actually tuning from Grand Turk today. And today we had a very exciting moment of tourists got lost. And it's really exciting moment because we don't see anybody for weeks in the end. So how can you tackle your confirmation bias if you're sitting alone and you don't really have that much opportunity to discuss with others, apart from, you have to go out of your comfort zone, or you have to seek some groups on Facebook and so on?
Yeah, so I mean, I think very often when we select things to read, when we select shows to listen to, when we select social media to engage with, we choose people who are presenting, who are delivering the content, who are very like ourselves, who we identify with, who make us laugh, who ultimately confirm the beliefs that we have around the world. And again, if you're really serious about circumventing your confirmation bias in particular, really taking the time to spread your reading to books that would actually go against your beliefs. So if you're a conservative, you would read progressive, and vice versa. Equally on Facebook, if there are people whose beliefs that you don't necessarily believe in, why not listen to what they have to say? And I'm not talking about trolls, I'm talking about people who are making concrete arguments. I think this is super important in a society that's very polarized, but it's also a really good habit as individuals, again, to make sure that we're not falling foul to our own confirmation bias.
Absolutely, and also making sure that you fool technology every so often, because all these algorithms are just there to feed you with more confirmation bias, so you can be in your small little chamber unaware of what is happening around you. Now we have a comment from IPOV, that's Patrick Young, speaking from the forest. That's my husband. There you go. Lol, lovely to hear your Irish accent, Grace, and inspiring comments. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Patrick. I hope there will be some questions for Grace. Now, how can individuals leverage behavioral science to identify and overcome specific biases that might be hindering their career advancement?
So I think the first thing is to become aware of the biases that are likely to hold your career back. And very handily, I wrote a book on this topic, which is Think Big, Take Small Steps, and Build the Future That You Want. And it's packed full with the major biases that are likely to get in the way of your own career, both the ones that we hold inside ourselves, like confirmation bias, loss inversion, the tendency to shy away from risk, but also the biases that other people might have. So, it's International Women's Week. Women notoriously face different levels on the playing field as compared to men. So we talk about discrimination, taste discrimination as well. So for me, we can absolutely use behavioral science to circumvent biases. One, once we identify the problem, which is recognizing the biases, which I think I do a nice job of describing in the book. Two, designing a solution. So figuring out what are we now going to do now that we've identified the bias. So if I recognize that I have imposter syndrome, if I recognize I have the planning fallacy, what am I going to do about it? But I think what's really cool about behavioral science and what I try to do in Think Big is also evaluating whether or not it's working. So it's not just me giving advice and telling you that it's going to work. Rather, I give you advice and I show you how you can evaluate whether or not it's working. So become familiar with the biases and really do take those small steps in order to circumvent them in your day-to-day.
Now, one thing that I like to also point out to ladies and gentlemen, when we hear these biases, I like to make sure that everybody speaks up. And how is that panning out for females? I mean, you're working with young brains, and I'm wondering, have you got some observations in your classrooms?
I mean, I think at the LSE, our students are pretty good, actually. The women who come there do speak up. And I think the professors are really good at making sure if they're not speaking up, that they're engaged in the classroom. And I think if we can kind of replicate that ethos in other environments, if I'm somebody who's leading a group, like a professor leads a class or a chair is leading a meeting, it is absolutely my responsibility to equalize opportunities, visibility, and voice in that scenario. If I'm in a place where there's certain individuals in the room are not speaking, they may or may not be women, but they're choosing not to speak on a daily basis, I shouldn't typecast them as low performers, or I shouldn't put a label on them as introverts, but I should recognize that it's really up to me to bring those voices into the room. And I think if all of us who are kind of who are listening today and where this live actually reaches, took that time when we're sitting in the room, whether we're the chair or not, to make sure that there aren't people who are excluded and to nudge participation, then some of the problems that women have in the workplace would actually go away.
Right. That's easier said than done, because how do you bring these voices? What do you do?
Again, you can think about ways in which you can conduct the meeting where we don't let the dominant people rule the conversation. So I've been asked a number of times, it's 117 actually, to go to companies to give confidence to either introverts and or women so that they speak up in meetings. And I always ask, because I don't do that, by the way, so please don't email me for that. It's not a service I provide. But I always ask when people contact me about this, what are you actually doing to quieten the extroverts? So the chair of the meeting can do a number of things. There's some easy hacks where the chair of the meeting in the very beginning can say, I'm here today to listen to lots of new ideas. I don't want repetition. And I'm going to make sure that everybody has 5 minutes to speak. So that means if you speak longer than 5 minutes, I am going to cut you off. But I'm hoping that it will bring everybody into the conversation. And that simple prime has been found to be very effective to make the people who dominate the conversation become much more concise, so they still get to participate. But equally, it also signals that this particular person really wants to hear from all the voices in the room. I think the second thing is there's lots of other gimmicks along the lines of these primes and hacks that people can use. But the chair of the meeting has to really be listening to the women when they speak up, really taking on their perspectives. It's very rational for me as an individual to stop talking, stop going to meetings, stop engaging if I'm being ignored. So along with the commitment to prime a better meeting, there has to be a commitment to hear the voices and enter them into the decision-making and the ultimate conclusion of the meeting.
Mm. Well, if I'm being ignored, then I'm sure there is a behavioral science to encourage you still to speak up or to raise your voice, even though you feel like giving up after several times of being ignored. What are these tips?
Well, I think, Peter, if I'm in a room where I'm routinely being ignored, I do think that you should think about, is there another room that you should be going into? So if you have a manager who doesn't hear your voice, who doesn't include you in decision making, who doesn't give you opportunities, who doesn't give you visibility, I would actually be looking to change who your manager ultimately is. I think there are tactics about speaking up. So people can speak up, for example, and they can say when they're when they initiate their conversation, I have 3 points to make. So that will prime people not to interrupt them until their 3 points are made. I think another way of speaking up that tends to be very effective is to look to what is the example that has come before you, reiterate that example, and then put your new idea into the meeting. But all that said, I think if there's an effort for your voice to be heard, particularly if you're earlier in your career, please do think about leaving the organization and or leaving the manager within the organization and finding another opportunity. Life is too short for you to become a coach for a manager who ultimately isn't doing the right thing.
Mm. Life is too short, and also our live stream is too short to avoid any questions. And we have great questions from Patrick. Confirmation bias, a big issue in polarized and island nations. Phew, thank goodness that doesn't apply to our homeland then. There you go. And another, agreed in sharing. Patrick says, as I specifically make it a priority to bring in the person who hasn't spoken. Also encourage the most expert to speak first on a topic, as that calls the any topic talkers. There
Wow.
you go. There is actually no question from Patrick. And finally, we have a question. Do you think it is good to deploy tour de table approaches? Example, asking every person to give 30 seconds or a minute on a topic.
Yes, I think if you're trying to strategize, if you're trying to innovate, giving people an allocation of time, 30 minutes, a minute, something short, so we can actually hear the ideas around the room, is a fantastic way to get creative juices flowing, but also to make sure that people who tend to be ignored definitely get heard.
Hmm. Speak about confirmation bias. I am going to be the devil's advocate here, and I wanted to ask you, Grace, if everybody would come with the background of education from LSE, that would be still confirmation bias, and not really diverse brains here, because they are the likelihood of them coming with the same perceptions from Dr. Grace, for example, can be detrimental to diversity, right?
Yes. So, I mean, I think LSE does have one of the most global student campuses compared to any other university in the UK. But that all said, within a university, there will be a particular culture. And within that culture, it will help shape people's preferences, values, and beliefs. And when we think about diversity, we're going beyond, taking a picture that actually looks diverse. We're looking for cognitive diversity. So again, a good strategy when people are hiring is to look for a real spread of universities across the world if your labor market actually allows it. But very few companies actually do that. They tend to have target universities where they hire from. So again, to the point that's just been made by Beta, this ultimately will cause not just confirmation bias, but a push away from the diversity that the firm might actually benefit from.
Fantastic. Thank you for your great words of advice. And now let's go to thinking big. Beyond thinking big, can you share some practical strategies based on behavioral science to help individuals set and achieve ambitious career goals?
Yes. So one of the first things is really to pay attention to time. So how you are spending your time, and doing an audit of your diary can really help with this. And I ask people to do two things when they do this. One, think about allocating things into three buckets: the things that give me enjoyment in the moment, the things that will help me in the future, and the third, which are time wasters. And the second is to pay attention to the amount of time that you're spending to advance your career now, today, as an investment in 5 years and 10 years' time. And when people do this, they tend to recognize a few things. So the first is that they're spending too much time on activities that are present day fun. So there's nothing wrong with having fun, but if we spend too much time having fun today, we're not saving for tomorrow. So we're not saving for that person who are going to become securing us a better job, a better income, and ultimately a better lifestyle and a better retirement. The second thing is to look to see what is the exact amount of time that I'm spending advancing my career for the future. And as I said, very often this is zero. This is a real pity. Most people turn up to their employers every single day and do an absolutely amazing job, but they fail to recognize that's advancing the business that they're in and not themselves as an individual. So in Think Big, Take Small Steps and Build the Future You Want, I ask people to circumvent, which is time inconsistent preferences, this trading off for now for the future, and allocate a minimum of 90 minutes to doing 3 activities, and one of 3 activities every week. One of them is continuous learning. The second is paying attention to networking opportunities that are on the job that you're in. So really leveraging the current company that you're in. And the third is making sure that you're out and about and you're securing better networks. So if I think about one of the biggest things that people need to pay attention to, it's the problem of time and consistent preferences. The second, which also relates to time, is the planning fallacy. So most of us, when we think about doing something, we underestimate the time that it will take us. And when we do that as human beings, we allocate ourselves the label of a failure when we don't come in time. Instead, it's good to recognize that the average person tends to underestimate time by about 1.5. Me, I've managed to figure out that I'm 2. So I'm really succumb to the planning fallacy more than the average person. But nonetheless, by scaling up the time that we allocate or allocate to do activities, either in the workplace or at home or in some other domain, it really sets us up for success.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are allocated 1 hour and we are already 23 minutes in. So let's share another brilliant Iris Apfel quotation. A museum curator once said to me that there is a great jazz component to the way I do things because good jazz is improvisation and draws elements from all different cultures. And that's the way I do everything, the way I dress and decorate. So is there any room for improvisation in behavioral science?
I mean, behavioral science is it's not a discipline. So lots of different disciplines feed in: economics, anthropology, psychology. There's even some computer scientists actually working in the behavioral science. And now, so the answer is absolutely yes. It's an art. We're still very much in the learning curve. So improvisation is very much welcome.
Why is improvisation welcome? Is it breaking the habits or?
I think improvisation on the individual allows them tailor the type of tweaks that people like me recommend that they do. So one of the things that I try to do in my own work is really stress that I can give ideas that are based on academic research, but the academic research is done on samples of people that might not necessarily look like you. So they might have different tastes, different habits, different preferences. So the impact of the advice might also be different on you. So I always encourage people to improvise with the type of interventions that they're doing in order to improve themselves, to tweak what they're actually doing after 1 week, and again, evaluate whether or not it's working. So for example, if you're trying to hone resilience, somebody might say to you to do a particular technique in order to hone resilience. It could be practicing gratitude. And one of the easiest ways to practice gratitude is at the end of the day to recall to yourself the good things that have actually happened in your day. So 3 things. But somebody who's on the call might try that and figure out actually it's better for them in the morning. It's better for them to wake up to really think about the good things that have happened to them the day before, or the good things that they hope to happen to them in the day ahead. And that's what gives them resilience. And I think that improvisation around the techniques that behavioral science is recommending should definitely be done at the personal level and definitely be evaluated so people are sure that they're doing things that really are in line with improving their well-being and also other outcomes in their life.
Well, we are talking about behavioral science, and I already feel like my brain is full, Grace. So, what are, apart from the practicing gratitude, what are other practical hacks you can share that individuals can use to bounce back stronger from setbacks and develop greater resilience?
So, I think the first thing is to really focus on the other side of it. So, not about bounce back from failure, but about the anticipation of failure before something has ever happened. So there's really good evidence that suggests that people anticipate losses of things like promotions and opportunity, public speaking, other things that you generally people find a bit nervous when they're throwing their hat in the ring for them, that they anticipate those in a way that decreases their resilience scores. So when we do that, we basically weigh up the costs and benefits in our head of what's going to happen, and we overestimate the likelihood of failure. The other thing that we overestimate is the cost, pain on our own well-being, because as human beings, we actually tend to be wonderfully resilient. So by underestimating that cost, we're not likely to put ourselves forward. So very often we count on failure and shaking ourselves off from failure. I would love people to shake themselves off from anticipated loss aversion, which stops them putting their hat in the ring in the first place. So hopefully, if anybody is listening and you are thinking about kind of putting yourself forward for something that's kind of scary, that you'll see now that you're anticipating the losses in a way that's really, really bad for you. You're overestimating how it's going to make you feel afterwards in a very negative direction, and you're actually much more resilient than you think.
You're much more resilient. You're gaining knowledge, or as the quotation brought to us by Racy, our assistant, says, you're getting better with age unless you're a banana. Now, what are some practical what are some examples of how applying behavioral science principles to daily life has benefited individuals? Maybe you have some examples from your students.
Yes. So, I mean, very often when we're trying to get ourselves to do something hard, there's a moment just before we do it where we try to get out of it. And behavioral science has done a lot of research into carrots and sticks. So what that means is the carrots are incentives and the sticks are negative punishments to try to get us to the place where we want to be on time. So a really good example of this is for people who want to go running in the morning, for example, and the alarm might go off and they tend to hit snooze and they never get up. So behavioral science will say, well, one, you can make it easy for yourself. You can put your running shoes out, you can put your tracksuit out and be ready to go. But the second is that you can also give yourself incentives. So if I show up to run 5 days a week, I'm going to get that lovely massage that I want at the end of the week, or some other treat that the person might actually might enjoy. On the other hand, you could think about, okay, maybe even with those incentives, even with the promise of something nice at the end of the week, it isn't working for me. So instead, I'm going to have a punishment. And the punishment could be that I'm going to give money away. Now, in the beginning, when behavioral scientists explored this, they looked at giving money away to charities that the person cared about. And it tended to be not that effective because after all, at the end of the week, if the person hadn't showed up for themselves, they ultimately would be giving money to a charity that they do care about. So they flipped that on its head. So they are now that there's this idea that you commit to giving money to giving money to a cause that you really hate. So if you're somebody who's anti-guns, for example, you could give it to the National Rifle Association, and that has been shown to be very effective. So very often we will end up doing absolutely anything to make sure that we don't go against our beliefs and values. So what I would say to people, whether it's in the health domain that I described, in the career domain, which is what we're talking about this evening, if you're finding it hard to do something and get something done, really think about carrots and sticks. Can you incentivize yourself in a way that makes it worthwhile? So if, for example, you're studying a skill that's really, really difficult, is there a treat you can give yourself at the end of the week? Or is there a punishment that you could give that you can give yourself if you don't show up every day? And also next to that, really think about just making it very easy for yourself to show up. So what, for me, when it comes to continuous learning, I'm much more likely to show up if it's online, where I can actually schedule the courses around my own schedule at work, which tends to be quite hectic. Whereas for somebody else who's listening, they might be much more likely to show up if they're in a really nice lecture hall around some other colleagues and peers. So thinking about how can I make it easy for myself? How can I improve the benefits and how can I improve the costs?
In what ways can behavioral science insights be applied in personal relationships? Because, I have some girlfriends who say, oh, they will never find a good partner. They are spinsters and they are well past the age of being attractive. What would you say to them?
I mean, firstly, I think that people are nobody is too old to find love. I will say I'm really speaking outside of my own expertise, but it does seem like an important question So I will tell you what I know about this literature. The literature on matching is actually really boring. So what most of us can do, which is the best for us, is to match with somebody who's very like ourselves. So rather than seeking differences in people, which a lot of people do when they're on the romance market and they end up feeling very exhausted from it because it doesn't work out, look for somebody who's very similar to you. I think now, because of technology, this has been made very easy. There's lots of platforms for all different types of people in society that are based in tastes and preferences. And I think you should just get out there. I think you should kind of just get out there, meet some people, and hopefully it works out. But at the same time, it's possible to live a full life even without a romantic partner. So definitely not my area of expertise, but I have a lot of hope for anybody who wants to find love.
Oh, absolutely. It's not about lowering your standards. It's about looking at positives. Because if you look at positives each day, every day, you're going to find them. Now, are there any common misconceptions about behavioral science that you would like to address?
I think having the word science, just like in social science in the title, suggests that there is exact answers that can come out, and maybe we'll get there eventually. I think we're very much in kind of an early stage of development. What I think behavioral science does very well, though, is it speaks about tools that people can use to make their lives better, and the second part, how you can evaluate those tools. So if you are to use behavioral science, I'd really encourage you to be both skeptical and curious, and making sure that any changes that you're making, you are evaluating yourself.
Mm. Now, speaking about confirmation bias, I want to go into the fact that so many people are talking about technology as being the bad, especially artificial intelligence. It's going to destroy jobs and so on. And we've seen it before. We've seen with every technological advancement, there is also naysayers as much as enthusiasts. And, what would you say to those? Is there much threat from artificial intelligence or technology, or is there some explanation why people see the negatives more than the positive side of things?
I think when we look back on the third industrial revolution, where we had the introduction of robotics into the labor market and also into our homes, people really reacted in quite a similar way that they're reacting to artificial intelligence. So there were people who were very excited about the technology, what it would mean for the labor market, and then there were people who were less excited. So I'm really not surprised that we're seeing this with the advent of AI. The one thing I'll say about artificial intelligence that bothers me slightly is we do have this extraordinary powerful technology that is being launched that's being launched into economies across the world. We don't really have a clean idea about what it's going to do to those economies beyond knowing for sure that it's going to replace some jobs and make other jobs much more efficient. What scares me slightly is that policymakers aren't having a really good conversation about how to capture the rents from this technology. So what that means is that if I am somebody whose job is lost because of artificial intelligence, you would think that the artificial intelligence that's replacing me would pay a fee to the government to cover the options for upskilling. So for me as an individual and also a behavioral scientist, I'm definitely not surprised that there's these differing views. I think always when there's big changes, we will have people on both sides of the fences. I think what should be worrying everybody, though, is that these conversations haven't yet reached a place where we have policies around the new technology that will safeguard the losers and make sure that there are some winners. But when people do win, they are giving fees back to the government to cover upskilling and other things that we're going to need.
Great answer. Thank you so much. We are talking about behavioral science, how to apply tips and hints on everyday life to increase our satisfaction. Now, are there any ethical considerations to keep in mind when applying behavioral science techniques to influence others' behavior?
Yes, I think the short answer is yes with a full stop. Going back to the 70s and 80s, many of the psychologists that would inspire behavioral science today did experiments that were very questionable, where they influenced people to do things that weren't in their best interest, where they created environments where people would have had these extreme negative emotions that they otherwise wouldn't have had. And I think one of the best things that have come into universities for behavioral science and for all other disciplines is thought and consideration that goes into ethics. So for us, for any research project that we do, we need to submit ethics to the LSE. LSE really has a do no harm policy around the conduction of research, to the extent that they would reject something where they thought that somebody might be harmed, not just physically, but also to do with their well-being. So anytime we're doing research on human beings, we need to think about vulnerabilities. So whether people who are in the research are more likely to be vulnerable. So for example, children, but we also need to think about the negative effects that are happening with experiments and other interventions that researchers are doing. So I would be very skeptical of anybody who is conducting research that hasn't had an ethics board in a recognized institution or recognized organization scrutinize the project, give feedback, and then give approval.
And how can individuals differentiate between helpful behavioral science strategies and potential harmful manipulation tactics?
So for me, I always think you should look where the power is. So if I'm getting involved in an experiment, am I the person who is in control? Am I the person who has the power? Am I the person who has the autonomy? And if the answer is yes, I think you should feel okay about it. If the answer is no, I think you should walk away. So a really good example of this, of an application of behavioral science that I like this in another field, is the apps that now a lot of banks have where they show you where you're spending your money. So they'll say to me, Grace, you're spending 20% of your money on coffee, 30% on clothes, 20% on rent, et cetera, et cetera. And why I like that is because it's informing me that as I go about my day to day, as I'm in my fast brain, as I'm in my unconscious, I'm spending on things that I may or may not really want to be spending my money on. My bank gives me no advice on whether I should change my behavior. It just gives me that data, which is really powerful. So sometimes I will look at it and say, actually, it's really interesting that I'm spending so much money on that segment of my life, and that's not really where I want to be putting my money. So any intervention where you're helping the customer get more information, making information salient to them, that they otherwise would not necessarily have salient, and kind of circumventing information overload, I'm a fan of.
Well, I'm a great fan of Duolingo. I'm practicing their languages, and using their gamification model is definitely keeping me abreast on everyday behavior. Can you see any other apps or tools that are increasing chances of success in behavior?
I mean, I'm not a huge consumer of apps, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask this question. I know this is a huge market, though, because I know that because these apps are marketed to me. I think if you're a user of these apps, given that they're taking your data, you really do need to think about, is it giving me is it giving me advantages in my life, and am I the person who holds the power in this situation? I would move away from any apps that's selling you things. But yes, I think apps that can help you track habits, track goals. I use paper, so I'm extraordinarily old-fashioned in this regard because I like to be offline. But really considering the apps that you've downloaded onto your phone, whether or not they're giving you benefits and whether or not they're trying to sell you things, is a good way to discern whether or not they're good for you.
Well, another app that I recommend is actually a tracker on your phone, so you can see how much time you're spending on the apps. There is also a time tracker on your laptop, so you can see how much time you're spending reading through Telegraph, Daily Telegraph, or whatever you're reading. So you can use your time wisely.
Financial
So
Times. So I write for the Financial Times. So maybe people should read the Financial Times.
there you go. If you have a subscription, if you can afford it, definitely go ahead over to Financial Times. Now, apart from FT, what other resources or further reading materials would you recommend, Grace?
So I think if you look on my website, there are resources not just of my own work, but also of other people's work. So if you go to www.gracelordan.com, you'll find lots of different resources on the topics that we're talking about, from Harvard Business Review articles, from articles in mainstream media, to academic articles, to social influencers who do a really good job of summarizing some of the things that are coming out. So that's worth checking out. The second is I'm the director of the Inclusion Initiative at the LSE. And we also have a website. So it's www.lsc.ac.uk/TII. Or if you Google the Inclusion Initiative LSE, you will find it. And there again, you find lots of free resources. So we have great video content. We have great thought leadership written by me and my colleagues at the LSE. And a lot of the topics that we tackle are the ones that are interesting to the PhD listeners. So how to be a better leader in the workplace, how to save yourself time, how to have more empathy, how to build resilience. So the type of things that are really important in today's workplace.
And if you want to study behavioral science and become like Dr. Grace, what would be your advice apart from probably joining LSE?
Well, I think the first thing, I never recommend that somebody takes the plunge into a degree, simply because it's extremely expensive in terms of time and money to do a degree these days. I think the starting point before you decide to commit to a degree is to check out the free resources. So, I mean, on Coursera, there's amazing free resources where you can look at courses on behavioral science. In the at the LSE, we have lots of different short courses. One of mine is Inclusive Leadership through Behavioral Science. That's an online course that you can do, and it brings you together with people in an online space, an amazing virtual campus from all around the world. There's also courses that you can do weekly on behavioral science. So soon I'll be launching a week open enrollment course for executives on behavioral science. And I think if you've done those tasters, so you've used the free resources, maybe you've done a kind of a low paying course and you like it, yes, you should commit to doing a master's or an executive master's in behavioral science. And ideally, you should choose the LSE.
So, Grace, here is another time to ask the questions we always like to ask our lovely guests. And what advice would you give to females to have their career or start an entrepreneurial journey? That's the question we like to ask. And I'm wondering, is there any answer, including behavioral science there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's really important to pay attention to opportunities, visibility, and voice. So to look around you, if you're somebody in your career, and to ask yourself, do I have less visibility, opportunities, and voice compared to my peers? Do I have equal or do I have more? If you find yourself in a situation where you have less, you probably do need to get another manager and another opportunity. If you're going into entrepreneurship, ask the same question. If I look at people who are similar to me in this space, do I have the same opportunities, visibility, and voice? And again, if you find yourself having less as compared to other entrepreneurs, you really do need to expand your network. There's some really cool advice in my book Think Big about how you can actually do that, not just physically introducing yourself to people, but how you can write emails in a way that are much more likely to be replied to, how you can interact with people so they're much more likely to find your ideas interesting, how to hone your elevator pitch. But the biggest thing for any of us, whether we're going solo or whether we're in an organization, is paying attention to opportunities, visibility, and voice, and making sure that we're being treated fairly. When it comes to women in our economy, we often focus on the gender pay gap and women on boards. But what determines those outcomes upstream or earlier in the career journey is access to opportunities, visibility, and voice. So these things for you as an individual are well worth paying attention to.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Opportunity, visibility, and voice, vital for your career. And we also discussed the fact that there are soft skills that are more important for our career growth. So, what are the 5 top soft skills you believe would help any female to lift their leadership skills?
So I think adaptability is the first one, and I think that's the first one by a big mile. So really being open to adapting to change would allow you to navigate yourself through uncertainty, but it also doesn't keep you stuck in situations that you might be for too long. So again, when we look to see what holds women back in organizations, very often they stay stuck in a situation that is really quite negative for them, and being adaptable allows you move beyond that. Second, I would say resilience. I devote a whole chapter to resilience in my book, Think Big, and really thinking about not just how to hone or make your resilience stores bigger, but how do you preserve your resilience reserves? How do you react in a negative event that happens in the workplace? How long does it take you to get over it? All of these things are worth paying attention to. The third, I would say, is empathy. So I've written very long articles and in academia, but also in popular press, that really talks about the new economy, the fourth industrial revolution, the advent of AI, and how before managers were promoted based on competency, but now we're seeing empathy mattering more. And actually, one of the projects that I did with my colleague Cecily, Justin, and some others really highlighted that finally people are actually getting paid more for having more empathy and having more job opportunities. So again, thinking about how you can actually hone your empathy. The fourth, there isn't really a name for this as a soft skill, but getting people to tame their own egos. So one of the biggest reasons that we succumb to confirmation bias, we don't take a risk on opportunities. We find ourselves in situations sometimes lacking confidence, really is because our ego is likely to be bruised. And if you manage to tame your ego, you'll find yourself putting yourself out there a lot more, but you'll also find yourself being able to hear the ideas of other people in the room. About 50% of my time I spend teaching inclusive leadership, and inclusive leadership is usually held back because of people's ego. And the last but not least, I would like people to work on how you actually engage with people in a humorous way. So there's really good evidence to suggest that our happiness actually goes off a cliff when we enter the labor force, and it doesn't recover until well after we're past retirement. So again, it's not normally thought of as a soft skill, but humor and how to engage people with humor in a way in the workplace that makes them feel comfortable, makes them feel psychologically safe, and ultimately leads to a better outcome for you and for your team is incredibly important. So hopefully 2 interesting ones: humor as a soft skill, and also ego for something to be concerned with, and 3 mainstream ones for people to consider.
That's interesting, Grace, because I have to say I was expecting from you one thing that was coming over and over, which was communication. But I believe there is element of communication in the applying humor in your leadership style or in your working environment. So you're off the hook there.
Thank you.
Now,
I do see communication as a competency with respect to a hard skill, because I think no one will know I'm a genius if I can't communicate it with people. So I do, yes, communication is extremely important. But I think as we move beyond into the fourth industrial revolution, it's interesting to think about what are the things that are emerging, what are the trends that are emerging in soft skills.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Now, none of us are able to achieve success without help from others. Is there anybody you're particularly grateful to, and why?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it has to be my mom. So I wasn't a particularly good student in school. I wasn't particularly interested in school. I didn't find academic subjects incredibly interesting, which might surprise people, given I've ended up working in a university. And my mom really taught me the habit of consistency, which I think is the unsung hero of success, where I would have to show up, study, put in time for subjects that I don't like. And I think learning that from my mom very early in life has led to me having consistency as a trait now, which really has held me in good stead. But again, I kind of iterate carrots and sticks in this regard, because even though my mum wasn't a behavioral scientist, she definitely used incentives and punishments in order to get me to do my study. So if you are kind of struggling with being consistent around a particular domain in your life, whether it's your career, whether it's your health or something else, do think about this idea of carrots and sticks to get you going.
Carrots and sticks to get you going, and we are going towards the end of our
Wow.
live stream. Now, Grace, thank you so much for raising another for being a daughter of another great example. Having great role models definitely helps along the way. So how is behavioral science there applying the role models into action?
So you're asking why are role models important through a lens of behavioral
Yes.
science?
Well, is there any behavioral science outcomes from applying role models in
Yeah.
your life, or having these role models as a great navigator for your career?
No, absolutely. I mean, role models as a theory within behavioral science links to the standing ovation model. So if you're in a theater and you're sitting in the front and you've seen a play that's really terrible, you can do a really cool experiment by standing up and clapping and giving a standing ovation. And what you'll find is that even if the play is absolutely terrible, lots of people will stand up also. So for me, when I think about role models, I look to see who are the people who are in my line of vision, who I would like to meet, who I think that I have something to offer them, because I think these connections are reciprocal. But equally, I ask my challenge network, who do you think that I should be meeting? Who do you think can be a role model for me? And having visibility of people who have ended up in a job that I would want to do, have ended up in a place that I would want to go, has been really inspiring for my career, and also really informative.
Fantastic. Well, we are full packed with lots of great advice from Grace. And now I wonder, what have you to say when we apply the great quotation by Eleanor Roosevelt? Women are like tea bags. We never know their true strength until we put them in hot water. In life, how are you in hot water?
I think I'm pretty good. So I think in life, when something negative happens, I put it into two buckets. So the first is, will I think about this in 5 years' time? And if the answer is no, then I don't worry about it. If I conclude that I will be thinking about it in 5 years' time, I really give it a lot of consideration in terms of weighing up the costs, the benefits, and the risk. And I also go to my challenge network. So that technique, which I only started adopting about 5 years ago, has allowed me actually to say with confidence that I'm pretty decent in hot water.
Pretty decent, great tea with milk, would you say? And do you apply milk first or milk after?
Oh, after. Oh, wow. I mean, I can't even be friends with somebody who puts it in first.
There you go. Here is a little behavior habit that we want to share with everybody who wants to learn how to drink tea as a proper English person. Now, or Irish person. Now, time to another great quote. Success is not about managing time, it's about managing ourselves within the time we have. Stephen Convey says, and we have very little time, so let's go to another question about book I wish I read before I started my career. What's the title and why did you pick this book?
Well, I'm going to choose my own book, and it's not because I'm a narcissist. But in the book, if you do read it, I really go to battle with a lot of the biases that affected me through my career. And I think if I had the information that I managed to put down in the book and use as experiments on myself 10 years ago, I might actually be in a better place. So yes, for anybody who's out there who's struggling with their careers, that you can look for a book to solve the problem for you, or maybe you should go and write your own book.
Absolutely. Well, there is no time to time your ego here, Grace. Definitely speak about your book. And that's the way I found you on LinkedIn and I wanted to invite you. So, definitely, you put in action this opportunity, visibility, and voice. It's definitely coming through, Grace. Now, can you please give us your favorite life lesson quote and how did it change you?
Oh, so I love George Bernard Shaw. So there's a quote that he's written that says, "Life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself." And, for me, not having an exact destination of where I'm going to end up in my career, moving away from labels of careers and thinking about instead of the tasks that I get to do on a day-to-day basis has been extraordinarily freeing. So, yes, I see myself as much more of a creation as opposed to having a destination. And I think that quote really sums it up very nicely.
Beautiful quotation. Another quotation we want to share with us, with you. Time flies like an arrow. Fruit flies like a banana. So hack your time wisely before it flies away with your bananas, Groucho Marx said. Now, let's imagine that you could meet anyone in the world to have private breakfast anywhere in the world. Who would you meet and where would you take them to have this private breakfast?
So it's International Women's Week. Sadly, this person has passed away and I've never got to meet them. It would be Ruth Bader Ginsburg. If I could go back in time, I would love to take her to the Delaunay, which is near LSE. It has wonderful surrounds, wonderful breakfasts. And I know I would have a wonderful conversation with the woman who herself actually faced a lot of adversity and also managed to do an incredible amount for people, in particular with respect to battling discrimination.
Absolutely, and she definitely knew how to make the room and how to make the presence, and she inspired many generations to come. And that's it from episode
I was going to
133.
ask you who you would bring for breakfast before we
Oh,
left.
oh my goodness. You know, you're not the first person to ask me. It would be Cindy Gallop. I don't know whether you heard
Oh
about
yes,
her. There
good
you
choice.
go.
Good choice. Amazing. Thank you. Happy International Women's Day.
Happy Women's Day, everybody. It's a great time to celebrate, not just on in March, not just 8th of March. You definitely should celebrate women around you and cheer them up because we together can be stronger. And that's it from episode 133 of the PhD live stream. Thank you very much, Dr. Grace Lordan. To stay updated and ensure you never miss another positivity hack delivered episode, follow Women on IT and turn on notifications to be alerted once the video has been released. Next week, PhD Andrew Weaver with topic leveraging behavioral science career time and resilience hack. No, sorry. Topic is strategies to accelerate women in senior leadership. There you go. Definitely another great topic that touches upon behavioral science. Thank you so
You.
much. Thank you to our lovely audience. Thank you to our production team. Thank you for your great, full of great tips episode, Grace. And as always, our positivity quote comes from positive thinking only and goes, look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder, because it definitely is going to leverage your career as a positive person in the room. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, if you can't change your behavior, change your attitude, as Maya Angelou says. Today is your day to hack the future, hack the positivity you want. Thank you.
See you soon.